This podcast is sponsored in part by the Downtown San Diego Partnership, a nonprofit advocate for the economic vitality and growth of downtown. From side-splitting annual dinners to free weekly yoga classes, the Downtown Partnership hosts dozens of can't-miss events each year. Get your tickets now to the annual Taste of Downtown, one of the premier culinary events in San Diego. Experience the flavors of downtown by sampling tasty bites from more than 40 restaurants throughout the Gaslamp Quarter, Financial District, and East Village on September 14th. To buy tickets and learn more about upcoming events, becoming a member, and the partnership's vision for downtown San Diego, visit www.downtownsandiego.org.
I had $2,500. I had a Ford Ranger and had a set of tools. I had my computer that I had since I was 16, my desk, and a bed, and I moved into a house that was being remodeled of one of my customers so that I would have no overhead expense while I figured this thing out. It was pretty challenging. The plan was figure it out and don't fail.
From Voice of San Diego, this is I Made It in San Diego, a podcast about the stories behind the region's businesses, the big and the small, and the people who made them what they are. I'm Lisa Halverstadt, and in this week's show, we'll talk to Daniel Sullivan about how he went from living in a garage to running one of the region's most successful solar companies. Sullivan Solar Power president Daniel Sullivan quit a well-paying job as an electrician to start a solar company, certain that the technology would take off. It was 2004. He had little more than $2,500 in an old pickup truck. He ended up living in a client's garage for 8 months. Daniel was unfazed by this slow start, though, and his persistence and motivation eventually led to the creation of a solar company that pulls in $50 million a year and operates in San Diego, Orange County, and the Inland Empire. Daniel grew up in San Diego, and when he graduated high school and all his friends started going off to college, he decided to take a different route.
What made sense was to go into the trade school, and I went to the IBW electrical apprenticeship program, which is a 5-year program. You go to school 2 nights a week and work 40 hours during the week. So that made a lot of sense to me. And then after finishing that program, I started studying photovoltaic or solar power systems because I had a job I had to do to get electricity to a very remote location. And when I did so, a light bulb went on for me that this is what I should be doing with my life, because it was the perfect intersection of everything I cared about, the environment, my trade, and it's just really cool technology. So that's how I got into it.
So you went to this training and you thought, wow, this is really exciting. What happened next?
I went to my boss and I said, look, this is something that I think is going to be a big deal. And he rebuked me. He's like, no, this is not interesting to me. I went back a couple more times. And then finally he said, nobody's going to do that. But if you want to go out and drum up the business, I'll give you a piece of it. And I said, okay, so I have to do all the work. You don't believe in this, and you're only going to give me a small cut of anything that gets developed. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So I told him, I said, okay, well, I'm going to quit. I'm going to go out on my own.
What motivated Daniel was something he considered bigger than himself. He was unsettled by the California energy crisis. He worried in the lead up to the war in Iraq, where talk of large oil reserves loomed. And he had a son who was born just a few years earlier.
So it all came together for me that this is what I need to do. This is what makes sense. And that we can't continue to be beholden to an industry that reaps havoc all over the world. And so with this technology and the fact that, I'd grown up in San Diego, I knew that we had all the sunshine we needed. We didn't have a lot of fossil fuels. Why aren't we doing this? Back then, there was probably a couple dozen companies that did solar, and there was only maybe 100 systems on the grid. So it was mind-boggling to me that nobody had taken this and taking it to the next level. So I wanted to do my part, and this became my calling, and this is what I went after.
But you must have been thinking, okay, I don't have that much money in the bank. I don't have a big investor to help me out. What were you thinking in terms of what the plan was? Was there a plan?
Yeah, go out and make it happen. It's so, a couple years ago, the company had got to a point where it just started becoming more and more difficult to get the people within the company to understand the why to what we do. And I had gone back into some old files I had, and I saw notes I had typed to myself, and it was almost naive in how I had written it out. But I said, by this year, I'm going to get this done. By this year, I'm going to get this done. And by this year, I was going to get this done. If I moved all those years, added 3 years to it, then that would have probably been pretty close to accurate. You're right, though. I didn't have a big investor, and I didn't have the means to go out and ask people for money. I didn't know how to. I'm an electrician by trade. And so it was really a matter of taking what little resources I did have and make the best of them. And so, I had $2,500. I had a Ford Ranger and I had a set of tools. I had my computer that I had since I was 16, my desk and a bed, and I moved into a house that was being remodeled, one of my customers, so that I would have no overhead expense while I figured this thing out. It was pretty challenging. The plan was figure it out and don't fail.
Around this time, Daniel stopped seeing his young son regularly. He had gone through a divorce and wanted his son to get to know his dad as a success, not someone living in a garage. Somehow, though, Daniel managed to stay motivated.
It was really a sink or swim situation. When you don't have a backstop, when you don't have a safety net, when you don't have a means to provide for yourself unless you succeed, at every step, you're very mindful of every decision you make. And so that $2,500 had to be built upon each and every week, not each and every month, not each and every year. Each and every week had to be a success. And each and every week the bills had to be paid. So it makes you become very focused when there is no room for error. And so I committed, this is what I'm going to do. I'm not going to fail. And I think, it's just coming back to me now. There were, I think one of my biggest motivators was actually people said that there's not a chance you're going to succeed. And people tell me, I've learned about myself over the years, when people tell me I can't do something, I take great pride in showing them that I can. People started disappearing when I moved into the garage, and they said, well, hit me up if it doesn't work out. Not, come to me if you ever need help. It's hit me up if it doesn't work out. So I wanted to make sure they all remembered that I didn't go to them and that I did succeed. And that this mission is a mission that I'm ultimately going to accomplish. So I think that was my greatest motivator at the time.
For most of us, it would be hard to stay motivated in this situation. A routine helped Daniel stay focused.
What I found at this time, because I was pretty isolated, it was all work, no play, and there weren't a lot of people around me, but I found that if I stay regimented and had a structured schedule, that those downtimes when I wasn't thinking about things became very limited. So, Monday through Saturday was work, and then from the time I wake up in the morning to the time I go to sleep. Then Sunday was, go to the laundromat, get your laundry done, plan out the next week, rinse and repeat week after week after week. And I did that for several years. And, it is trying emotionally. It's very difficult. I missed my son. I missed my old lifestyle, but as long as I stayed focused on what I was doing, I would overcome that.
And what was happening with your business at this time? So you're living in a garage and probably trying anything you can to get people to buy a system.
It was pretty trying living in a garage, getting up and going out and trying to convince people to take on what they viewed as a new technology. But because I was passionate about what I was doing, every setback was an opportunity to learn and do it better the next time. We slowly built a company, and I say we because early on, my childhood best friend became my first employee. He was my assistant, my apprentice, and my counsel when I needed someone to talk to. So we'd go out and find customers, and slowly but surely we'd bring more and more people to our ranks, and then they became advocates. It was important that every single person we touched became a believer in what we were trying to accomplish, which isn't easy to do with the technology people never heard of. And when you're asking them to spend $30,000 with a company that's operating out of a garage.
Try to think back. What was it like getting your first customer? Do you remember the first customer that you had and how that went?
Yeah, Andy. I won't say his last name, but he was, well, there was two that went about the same time. But Andy was the most rewarding because he was the director of the National Electrical Contractors Association in San Diego. And I had gone to a meeting, and afterwards I pulled him aside. I said, you should consider going solar. And he gave me a lot of what my old boss gave me, which was, this stuff doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It's not cost effective. And I said, okay, well, I'll challenge that. Let me come over to your house and give you a presentation, and you let me know if it doesn't make sense when I'm done. He's like, all right, but you're going to be wasting your time. So I went over there. And by the end of it, he was a believer. So 1 hour presentation, he's like, all right, I see how it makes sense. I'll give it a shot. Let's do it. So that was 13 years ago. His solar power system's still producing what it did back then. He paid for it through savings 6 years after he went solar. So it did everything I said it would do. And he's ecstatic, and he's one of our greatest advocates. So that was super rewarding.
How did you get to the point where you were able to get out of the garage? How long did that take, and what did it take?
That was about, so this was a house of a customer who was doing a major remodel, and I was doing the electrical work there. And that took, I was expecting to stay there a year. It took about 8 months. And then 8 months later, I think I'd had enough of it, and I figured out a way to move into an office in a business park in Miramar. But obviously what it took was money. I didn't have any money at the beginning. And my customer was gracious enough to offer that to me at no cost in exchange for taking care of their house, right? So, moved into this tiny office warehouse that wasn't much bigger than this room, about 15 by 15 feet. And the warehouse wasn't any bigger. And in the office, I had a hide-to-bed couch, my desk, and my computer, which I had a hide-to-bed because I had employees then. I didn't want them to see that I was sleeping in that office at night. In the warehouse, I had built a makeshift closet that was disguised, so they couldn't tell that it was where I put my clothes. And I had got a refrigerator. So that's what I needed.
The luxury.
The luxury.
And how long were you living in that situation?
In the office warehouse, I think that was about a year. Because, it was really luxurious, so I could stay there longer. But it was a continuation of the same thing. You keep working, you keep building the business by keeping true to your values. And after about a year, I moved to downtown San Diego, and for a short period of time, I moved out of downtown, but I've been there ever since.
In that time that you were in the warehouse, were you seeking out investors? Were you, trying to obviously really evangelize on this?
So I would go out and teach people about the merits of going solar, what it could mean for them, what it could mean for our region. But at no time did I go out seeking investors. I don't know why I'm investor averse. I think it really ties back to the fact that I do not want anybody telling me how to run a company that is so close to what I care about. As soon as somebody gives you money, they think they can start telling you what to do. And Sullivan Solar Power exists to make the world a better place for the benefit of our customers, not for the benefit of an investor. So So that was never something that was interesting to me. As a result, I also didn't have a safety net. So it kept me true to the roots of the company, which is every dollar comes in, put that back in the company, build it up, build it again, build it again.
How at this point were you going about trying to get customers? Obviously, people were just learning about solar. There were a lot of skeptics. A lot of people just didn't even know about it.
Yeah, I heard about this thing called the internet. So, oh man, I wish I remember the name of this company. They probably still exist, but it's basically a build your own website company. And so I built a website, and back then, like you were saying, there weren't a lot of people that knew about it. So the fact that there's a website about solar power for your house in San Diego was revolutionary.
So what year was this?
Yeah, no. This was like 2006, right? So I built the website in 2006, and it actually was really well received. It wasn't a great website. It was horrific in appearance, but it had the information people wanted, and it was about teaching people, about going solar. There were other companies that had websites. I'm not pretending this was the first solar website, but that, and then shortly thereafter, we started advertising on KPBS, which sounds nuts considering how small we were. But those are the people that are the demographic. So I met with the KPBS representative. The demographic there, they understand what we're trying to do. And so those people started calling us in large numbers, and that's when we exploded. The combination of the website and radio advertising made the company take off, and we moved from growing pretty slowly to pretty quickly. And, my mind was blown. I'm like, wow, I should have done this a long time ago, and it worked out great.
When we come back, how the business Daniel built out of a garage became one of San Diego's best-known solar companies.
The people that work at Sullivan Solar Power are driven by what we're trying to accomplish. And, our tagline is leading the solar energy revolution. They believe in that. They want to completely revolt and change the grid and change the way this world generates electricity. And so they come to work empowered and passionate about what we're trying to do. And that's what's driving the growth. It's not me.
I Made It in San Diego is made possible in part by a proud supporter of Make-A-Wish San Diego. Enjoy this short sponsored interview with Make-A-Wish and catch the rest of the interview at the end of the show. Suzanne Hughesby is Vice President of Make-A-Wish San Diego, a nonprofit that grants wishes of children with life-threatening medical conditions. Suzanne, thanks for being in the studio today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And you call them Wish Kids, right? Tell me more about some of the kids that you get to work with.
Right. So we grant wishes, as you said, to kids who have critical illnesses. So kids between 2.5 and 17 who are dealing with a life-threatening or a critical illness qualify for a wish. And there's actually a misconception out there that we only grant last wishes, or that kids are end of life in order to qualify, which is not the case. If a child has a critical illness, they'll qualify. Many kids go on to live, well beyond their wish, and the wish actually became a positive turning point for them in their battle.
Oh, yeah, that's great to hear. I do think that is a misconception. That's something I thought. So you get to check in and see your Wish kids grow up.
On occasion, some of them do stay involved. We actually had a former Wish child who, when she started college, became an intern in our office. So that's always nice to see kids on the other side of their journey.
You can hear the rest of this sponsored interview with Make-A-Wish San Diego at the end of today's show.
Welcome back to I Made It in San Diego. I'm Lisa Halverstadt. The founder of any fast-growing business quickly learns they can't do it all. New workers start serving at the front lines of the company. They end up selling what the founder created, and it's not always easy. Here's how Daniel remembers that transition.
Everyone that came into the company, I tried to, like I did with the customer, teach them the skill sets that I had learned over the years about what makes sense, what doesn't make sense when it comes to solar design, and how to properly present it to a potential customer, how to properly manage the job, because up to that point, I wore every hat. I was the project manager, I was the sales representative, I was the janitor, whatever needed to be done, I had a hand in it. And so then at that point, it became necessary to start taking certain hats off and giving them entirely to an individual because there was just too much work to be done, which meant I had to teach them everything I knew and trust that they would take it to the next level. So that was pretty rewarding. And we moved out of the Silverton office to an office on Arjohn's about 2 blocks away that was 2 times the size, and we declared we made it big. So it was pretty exciting. And then the people who had come into the company started taking off with their own expertise, and then we grew it. And slowly but surely, it was the commitment to educating our employees that made us ultimately grow.
Were there ever points where you thought you couldn't do this?
No.
So you were always just steadfast and thought you could make this work. You were determined.
There was times when I was nervous. I never doubted our ability to grow the company and to take care of the customers and that we were doing the right thing. That was never anything I was concerned about. I started to see that there were companies coming into the market that were backed by pretty large investment funds. That made me nervous, and I didn't know how it was all going to shake out. After seeing them operate for a few years, it became clear to me that these organizations were driven by the bottom line, and that the way they treated their people and the way they treated their customers was not very ethical. And so there's still some of those companies out there today that my crystal ball tells me aren't going to be around in the next 5 years. So when doing things right, you can build a company in a way that is going to have longevity. But if you're in the business to make a quick buck or to make a big splash and grab market share, don't expect to be here longer than Sullivan Solar Power will be.
But were there ever moments where you just worried about paying the bills? I mean, whether it was, starting... Tell me a little bit about that. Were there ever points where you just really were, up all night thinking, how am I even going to do this?
Yeah, I was very stressed many nights, many weeks, many months where it was, hand to mouth. You get a check and you get that into the bank account as quickly as possible so that you have the money to cover your bills, which are due the next day. It was very stressful. And that's the biggest stress of a business owner is managing cash flow. I think the lessons learned early on, not having a lot of money at my disposal, helped with that. You don't take earnings for granted. You don't let money go to waste. And you instill that in the people around you, and that helps you as you get bigger and bigger.
Surprisingly, a fire that destroyed nearly 300,000 acres around the time Daniel started his business helped his business. San Diegans whose homes were destroyed in the Cedar Fire got financial incentives to go solar when they began rebuilding their homes.
A lot of people in East County were rebuilding their homes, and we went out and taught them, you have an incentive available to you, and they embraced the technology. So it was good to see that these homes that were older homes at the time were being rebuilt. These fire victims were benefiting from a program that was designed specifically for fire victims. So we made them aware of it, and a lot of people signed up.
One thing that I kind of keep coming back to as you're talking is that, there was a big sales component, obviously, of what you were doing. You had to be confident that the systems that you were building were working, that everything was going to work out. Were there ever times that was hard to kind of put on that big smile and go out and say, hey, I have a great solar system for you. It's going to pencil out. I'm going to be around in 5 to 10 years when, something goes wrong?
Yeah. So when I pull up in my Ford Ranger from the garage that I was operating out of, I was conscious of the fact that this person who was intending to do or considering doing a large investment for their home would have concerns about who I am and what the company is at that time. So I taught them, I said, look, this is the technology we're lining you up with, and this is why, because this technology or this manufacturer has a proven track record. I'm a master electrician. I've been in the electrical trade for nearly a decade, and this is how we're going to approach your system so that they could be comfortable with our approach. The thing that we started with is still alive today in the company, and that is the systems have to perform in order for somebody to realize their return on investment. So if you're asking somebody, spend $20,000 to put these squares on your roof that are going to generate electricity and give you energy savings, you need to provide them with high quality products that are installed by people who know what they're doing. So state licensed electricians who have been trained, and you need to provide assurances and accountability for the customer in the form of guarantees so that they know that their investment is safe. We want everybody we touch to be an advocate for going solar in year 20 like they were the day we turned their system on. And that can only be accomplished if the systems are performing as promised.
How hard was it to get friends and family members to even believe in this pitch?
Very difficult to do. So, whether it was my boss before I took the leap or my first customer, they said, like my friends and family said, you're nuts. You're leaving a career where you have retirement, you have health and welfare, you have everything you need. Why are you doing this? So the naysayers, they ended up motivating me really. And so I thank them for that. But at the time, I wasn't too happy with them.
They made you a fighter.
Yeah.
Like the Christina Aguilera song.
I don't know if I'd use that reference, but okay.
One thing I definitely want to talk about too is just how fast your company grew. Can you talk a little bit about the, early on, it's you and your friend, then you had a few employees.
Sure. So, like I said earlier, my best friend from childhood became employee number one. He's still with the company today, and now he has 60 to 70 electricians that report to him. So he's done well for himself. And it grew, the first year I think we did around $100,000 first 12 months in business, and then 200, and then 300. And now last year we did 50 million. So that's a pretty substantial jump over a 13-year period.
Definitely.
Rewarding, stressful, substantial, and fast. So being able to manage that, I can't say that I did it entirely myself. In fact, I probably didn't even do the majority of it. The people who came into the company and their commitment to what we're trying to do has made this growth possible. I've been very fortunate in that the people that work at Sullivan Solar Power are driven by what we're trying to accomplish. And, our tagline is leading the solar energy revolution. They believe in that. They want to completely revolt and change the grid and change the way this world generates electricity. And so they come to work empowered and passionate about what we're trying to do. And that's what's driving the growth. It's not me, it's them. So they took the torch and they're running with it.
What surprised you most about your business as you got going with it? Was there anything that really shocked you?
Anything that shocked? Yeah, the biggest shock came in the form of a shot across the bow by the local utility, San Diego Gas and Electric. I suffered from a delusion that this solar thing was going to be loved by everybody, and because the PR that I had seen from SDG&E, the public relations efforts that they made, I thought they were on board with the idea too. But when you look a little closer, the investor-owned utilities in the state of California despise distributed generation solar power, and they want to shut it down. And so I think it was 8 years ago, SDG&E filed a petition with the Public Utilities Commission to start charging solar producers for the energy that they were putting on the grid.
At the time, SDG&E proposed adding a network charge to solar customers' bills, a move they said would help the utility maintain the grid. They billed it as a fairness issue. Solar champions like Sullivan weren't happy.
So think about that. My customers are putting energy on the grid in the middle of the day. SDG&E now wants to charge them a rate for the energy they are providing them. That's insane. And when I saw that attempt by them, I'm like, oh, great. We've got the utilities coming after our industry, and they're getting focused. So that scared me, and it startled me. That's when I realized that I'm going to have to get engaged a little bit politically and on the regulatory side.
And you definitely have. I would actually say you're one of the more outspoken business owners in town in some ways, because you come out and you're willing to get right to the crux of the issue. Can you talk about how that's changed over the years, or what that was like, kind of being more open about the challenges?
Well, I think it ties back to the friends and family question early on in the business. They said, you can't do this. I said, oh, yeah, watch this, and we're going to do it. We're going to move this city to 100% renewable energy. I'm going to build this business to be a very powerful and influential company to make the world a better place. So when it comes to utility attacks or fossil fuel manipulation, industry manipulation, I will be the first person to stand up and say, absolutely not. We're not going to believe your lies. We're not going to believe what you tell people. And we're going to educate those people about the things you're saying, because they're just falsehoods at best.
But the industry's also benefited from different incentives over the years. What's that been like as a business owner who's affected by some of the changes, the highs and the lows of that?
One of the things that made solar very interesting in the beginning was that the state of California, this also ties back to the previous question. I thought everyone's on board. This is where we're going. This makes sense. So the state of California had an incentive program, which was really the spawn of the energy crisis of 2000, 2001. Saying, we need to diversify our state and get more resources out there. So there were incentives from the state of California. There was incentives from the federal government. Hence why I believed everybody wanted this. And these were policies that both the federal government, both sides of the aisle, believe it or not, and the state government supported to move our region, our country, away from fossil fuels and towards the future. That did benefit the industry as a whole. It took what was an industry that was 100 systems and a couple of dozen companies in San Diego to what it is today, where there are 700 plus companies in the region being San Diego only, 700 in San Diego alone. Where are we at now? We've got to be nearly 120,000 systems, not 100, 120,000 systems deployed. So those were good policies from both sides of the aisle, said this is what we're going to do. That definitely benefited the industry and my company as well. The state programs ended several years ago, and the tax credit's the only thing that's left from the federal government. The solar cost as a result of this growth has dropped down substantially. Back when companies started, a typical solar power system would cost between $45,000 and $50,000, $45,000 to $50,000 for your typical system. Today, that is $20,000. So it's half the cost, and the incentives more or less are gone. And we're able to compete with fossil fuel generated electricity. So we're where we need to be. But
are you concerned at all with just some of the changes in the administration, for example, about what might be coming next for your company?
When I hear you call it an administration, it gives it more respect than it deserves. But, when the current administration got elected, it was very concerning for the industry. But when you look at who is actually in place in Congress, it's the same Congress that supported the tax credits that benefit renewable energy today. So given what we're seeing from the Oval Office, I don't think they're going to be able to derail what the rest of the government, federal government, has already decided they want to do, which is continue to support solar power and renewable energy as a whole.
It was interesting. You made a comment in a past interview that, building up a solar system was something that you mastered, and then you had to learn to master building up a staff. Can you talk a little bit about what you've learned about management as your company has gone from literally you in a garage with a friend to something so much bigger?
I think the number one thing I've learned, and that I need to continually remind myself, is not everybody thinks like me. So it's being able to communicate to people in the way they want to be communicated to. And that's not always the same way as how I want to hear or how I want to say things. So that's probably one of the most important lessons I've learned. and being able to align a person's inherent strengths with something that they're doing, while also trying to bolster their weaknesses so that those become not as important or not as relevant. So this is an ongoing art that I'm trying to master. I don't know if I ever will, but I'm definitely going to die trying.
As businesses grow from moms and pops to those that employ hundreds, it's easy for them to lose a bit of their identity. It's also common for leaders to need different skills to lead all those employees than they did to grow their business. I asked Daniel how he coped with that.
I started to feel as though we or I could be doing better to send people home fulfilled at the end of the day and continue to grow the company. I'd gotten to the point where I had to be humble about what my limitations are. You know, like I said, my background, I started digging ditches. I don't have a business background. I don't have a bunch of investors behind me. So I needed to bring someone in to help me understand the steps necessary to get the company to the next level. Once you move in from different sizes, you know, $10 million, $20 million, $30 million, $40 and $50 million company, the way you approach business starts to shift as well. And the amount of delegation has to change, and the amount of trust has to change. And just the general approach of how you conduct yourself in this role needs to move, because what worked in the beginning is not going to work where you are today. I started to understand that. I brought somebody in. In the beginning, it really sucked because he kept telling me everything I was doing was wrong. And that's the last thing I wanted to hear, but he was right. And so I got a healthy dose of humble pie and started to look at things differently.
One thing that really sticks out too about your business, you talked about your core values book, but you've also really stuck to, you know, a lot of things that you started with. So I have read about how, you know, you really pride yourself in still being a union shop. You have a special program that supports the Catholic diocese. You literally, the hat that you're wearing right now has your family insignia on it, which is also your company insignia. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, we'll start with the family crest. Going back to, you know, early on in when I was trying to envision what the company would become, I wanted a reminder of where I came from, because I didn't want to get to the point, because I assumed success, right? I assumed that we were going to get to where we wanted to go, that I forgot the amount of sacrifice that got me to where I was. So the family crest serves as that reminder for me. It means different things to other people. They understand what the symbols mean, and the lion means strength, the serpent means wisdom, and so forth. But for me, it serves as a reminder of where I came from. The union part, well, it's not a plug for the union, but the union way of doing things is the right way of doing things, in that they put everyone through an apprenticeship program that I benefited from. That knowledge and commitment to doing things the right way stuck with me, so much so that it's in every part of what we do. It's not just the electricians who are doing things the right way. Our sales staff, which are not allowed to be called sales guys because they don't sell anything, they are developers of projects. They have to do it in accordance with doing it the right way. And our training program, I try to, within reason, align it with the apprenticeship program, which is teach everyone what they need to know so that they can do it right. Because absent training, you can talk about doing it right all day, but it's not going to get you anywhere. The union thing was actually, it was weirder, if you can say that, in the beginning, because people, you know, I would talk to people like we were saying earlier, saying, look, I'm giving you the best guys. These are union electricians. One guy came to me and says, you're an upstart. That might be the dumbest thing I've ever heard, that you're using union labor. And I said, well, I can't afford to do it twice. So that's when he's like, oh, okay, I get it. Right? So staying union, that's true to doing it the right way. The family crest is really knowing where you come from and giving back to a community that's been so generous to me makes a lot of sense.
So what do you think is next for Sullivan Solar Power in the next 5 to 10 years? What's the next goal?
So we talked earlier about how utilities are not big fans of distributed generation solar, and that's not to be confused with the solar that's in the desert, because they can still control that and keep people beholden to their ridiculous rates. They don't want people moving away from their billing. And over the years, I've been engaged in, lobbying for the benefits of our customers and fighting in the regulatory arena to a certain extent, as much as my time allows. And that's tiring. That's very tiring. And it's not something that's going to go away. So I don't feel the solution towards moving us away from fossil fuels lies in the legislature or the Public Utilities Commission. I believe it lies in technology. And what's most interesting is as the utilities continue to try to change the rules and regulations for people who go solar, we're going to continue to work to find a technology solution so that we don't need them anymore. There is battery technology today that is infinitely superior to anything that was on the market when the company started. I predict in the next few years we'll be able to completely cut people off the grid. That's interesting. They don't need the utility anymore. They don't need their billing structures. They don't need their CEOs and their grossly overpaid salaries. That's exciting. When you can move communities off the grid that were formerly beholden to the SDG&Es of the world, that's revolutionary. And then we start seeing our vision fulfilled.
So battery power is the next really big thing that you're working on.
Yeah, solar with batteries included.
And are you working on any specific projects related to that or collaborating with other companies?
We are. We have 110 customers who have signed up to have battery systems installed. So I'll give you more on that in the next couple of months.
Okay. Looking back on this experience that you've had over just about the last decade or so, do you look back and see any mistakes that you've made? Is there anything that you would have changed?
Yeah, I regret, I go back and forth on this. I regret the time I was away from my son. That's the toughest part. But I hope and pray that in the end, he'll thank me for it.
Thanks for listening to I Made It in San Diego. I wrote the show, and Kinsey Moreland and Scott Lewis produced it. Adam Greenfield mastered and mixed it. Visit voiceofsandiego.org to learn more about our weekly Voice of San Diego political affairs podcast, plus Good Schools for All, The Kept Faith, and all the shows in the Voice of San Diego podcast network. If you like this show, go to voiceofsandiego.org and click donate. Or to sponsor the show, contact Aaron at vosd.org.
Now back to our sponsored interview with Suzanne at Make-A-Wish San Diego. Most wishes involve traveling somewhere fun. Is that right? Tell me a little bit more about the kinds of things these children are wishing for.
Right. So the wishes really are as unique as the kids' personalities. And a lot of kids do wish to dream of going away, going on a vacation, but there's actually a lot of other wishes that we grant that people maybe don't know about. I mean, a lot of kids unfortunately end up a little homebound, probably because of their treatment or maybe some limited mobility. So a wish like a dream bedroom makeover or a backyard with a really cool play structure might be a really great wish for a child. And sometimes we see kids like that feel a little bit isolated. They're missing out a little bit on typical childhood because of treatment and other things that are keeping them away from social activities. So if they then have this really cool backyard to play in or a really neat bedroom, it makes their friends want to come to them and it brings them a little bit back into the fold. So those are, I love those types of wishes. Kids get really creative. We had a little girl who wished to be a mermaid. And so we, asked her, what does that mean to you? So that we can make sure she's in charge of what it's going to look like, what the experience is, because we want a wish to be empowering for a child, that they don't just tell us something they want and we interpret it. We want to make sure it's coming from them and the way they dream about it, because kids are really not in control when they're dealing with an illness, and then Make-A-Wish comes in and gives them back a little control and lets them decide on their wish experience.
I was wondering about that. I have 2 young kids, and I think if I said, wish for anything, they would probably wish for something like a flying zebra. So is there ever a wish you can't make come true, or do you just pull all the strings, jump through all the hoops to make it happen in some fashion?
We sort of have a joke at Make-A-Wish that we say yes first and figure it out later. But really, when a child wishes for something, a lot of times it takes our very dedicated wish granting volunteers to get down to the heart of the wish, which is a term we use a lot. We ask a lot of why questions, and we ask them how they envision certain things, and I'll ask a lot of details, and you can dig down to what the real essence is of what they're wishing for. And then we can give it the Make-A-Wish treatment and give them a little surprise.
That's so cool. Your organization just granted its 4,000th ever wish in San Diego. 4,000 wishes, that's a lot. So tell me about that. How did you celebrate that occasion?
That was a very exciting milestone for us. So as you know, we're part of the national Make-A-Wish organization, but Make-A-Wish San Diego is actually just a small local nonprofit. We serve kids right here in San Diego, Imperial County, and we've been in town since 1983. So on June 30th, we surprised our 4,000th wish child. He didn't know. Now, he obviously knew what he wished for, but he didn't know he was our 4,000th wish. We brought him to Petco Park thanks to the Padres who hosted everything. We brought him down on the field, and he was given the surprise of a lifetime when he saw that the camping trailer he had wished for was actually right there in Petco Park, and all his friends and family and doctors and teachers were there to present it to him. And so we had this big, amazing celebration with all the community, all of our Make-A-Wish community in San Diego. And now that we've had this big celebration, our focus now turns to granting the next 4,000 wishes.
I can't even, I'm sure you get this a lot. I was looking at pictures on Facebook, and it's just so sweet.
It's okay. We have a lot of happy tears at work.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. You must get this question a lot of like, it's obviously a very heartwarming thing you do, but a heart-wrenching thing that you do. So, I mean, what keeps you going and what keeps you motivated?
That is a really good question. I've actually been with the organization for 13 years. And so I've seen a lot of ups and downs. And we always, I always say in our job, the highs are really high and the lows can be pretty low. But, we focus on the happy and the joy. And although every child we're dealing with is critically ill, and that's why they're a wish child, we also know that by empowering them to choose a wish, we're creating joy. When there's joy, there can be hope. And we believe that when a child feels better, just maybe they might get better.
That's great. That's powerful. That's absolutely true. You do a really touching, moving, important thing. And I'm sure there's lots of San Diegans that have thought about wanting to get involved. So what's sort of the easiest way to get in touch with you and make things happen and get involved with Make-A-Wish San Diego?
Well, a lot of people have this misconception that they have to be a millionaire to donate to us, or they have to be an actor in order to grant a wish, or they have to be a famous person to be able to help us. But the truth is, wishes are granted by everyday heroes in our community. It takes hundreds of people to pull off one wish. And everyone from the flight attendant to the limo driver to the baker who donated a cake for a wish send-off to the person who helped make the mermaid costume for a little girl who wished to be a mermaid. There's so many ways to get involved. The easiest way, the most efficient way to help us is to make a donation online to help us, because every dollar that we spend has been generously donated. We also have a lot of in-kind partners who help us have access to amazing things for our kids at a discounted rate. So if you are part of a business or a company that might have an item or a service that we could use to help grant wishes, our website is sandiego.wish.org, and there's a lot of ways that you can get involved. Another point you brought up earlier was that so many kids wish to travel. And so we unfortunately don't get discounts on airline tickets, and that's a big expense for us. So individuals can certainly donate their airline miles as well to help us send kids on those dream vacations.
All right. So sandiego.wish.org is the website. Check it out and see how you can get involved.